Darya sharara, do sharare, no.
Well, touch wood, I haven't had COVID. I've never had it. My family, my immediate family, my husband and my daughter have never had it. Touch wood again. Like everything, touch wood.
I've never gotten it, to be honest. My husband had. I mean, the rest of the family has, but knock on wood. My husband says, don't tell anybody.
No, we do not get sick. I believe that I have an incredible immune system and I rarely get sick.
I have never gotten sick. I was at a Paul McCartney concert, front row. The CDC told me I had been exposed to COVID from wherever I was sitting, and never got it.
I don't remember having a lot of fear about COVID. And fortunately, I did not get sick that year, and nobody close to me died that year or subsequently. So I'm just very grateful for that.
Neither one of us got it. We were being really careful because she's got diabetes and she's got some other issues that we didn't want her getting sick.
I didn't get COVID, by the way, in 2020. I followed all the COVID precautions and, social distancing, wearing a mask. I didn't just stay at home the whole year, but I was very, very careful, and it didn't actually freak me out. I just kind of went with it.
We were very, very diligent about masking. So we masked everywhere all the time, all at once. So we took a lot of measures to not be in large groups, to wear a mask. And so we have not gotten COVID that we're aware of. We've not gotten COVID. So we're the I guess they call them the novids. I don't think it's realistic to think that'll be for forever, but we were very, very cautious.
Yeah, COVID was pretty interesting. I never got sick. I was good with my vaccines. I was careful. My roommate was still finishing off her cancer treatment, so I had to be very careful for her sake. You just learn how to do things in different ways. And that's always challenging for us, but it's kind of good. Keeps us on our toes, So that was all right for me. I didn't mind that too much.
I have not had COVID. I did take the vaccines, boosters, but mostly a lot stay at home. That kind of takes its toll. It seems kind of easy for me. I had breast cancer. There's things you go through, right? But a friend of a friend mentioned, "Oh wow, you must have had a really rough year." And when I look back on it, I don't know, it didn't seem rough. Because you just take it each day. You just take it, okay, this is what I have to do, okay.
I can tell you that everybody that I knew in India got COVID. All of my family. Nobody died. The friends of friends, there were people that did pass away and they had to do the drive-by funeral type of things.
I had a couple of family members that got it. I actually had one family member who, actually a couple that were very heavily asthmatic. And so that was a concern. We had people who became quite ill. We have a big family too, so we didn't have anybody hospitalized we were very, very lucky when we saw what was happening around the country and around the world. So in that way, we were very, very lucky. There were people I'd heard of that this person's spouse passed away, or this person lost somebody, or this person. But as far as our family, nobody was lost. And although they did get quite sick, nobody had to be hospitalized. We felt very, very lucky in that way.
Well, I lost a cousin to COVID. He was in Oklahoma, I think. Yeah. I didn't know him that well, but he died. And I, like my sister, she'd been inoculated a bunch of times and she finally got it, but very mild case. And my daughter's had it several times. She won't get inoculated, but she gets through it every time.
Having COVID until last year. And that was just trying to reconnect with old friends and family that we hadn't talked to in years, to discover that the matriarch had passed away and that it was from COVID. But we didn't experience her passing or the memorial or anything like that at all with the family.
My son, who was super paranoid about it, he got it first. And he don't know where he got it. He could have got it pumping gas. He just don't know, He was really sick. But right away, he quarantined himself to the basement so that he wouldn't get the rest of the family members. But he was really sick. There was no vaccines at that time. And he couldn't even go to the doctor really to be diagnosed because they weren't letting nobody come to the doctor if you had COVID. If you had COVID symptoms, they weren't letting you in. So we just assumed because of the symptoms that he had, he couldn't smell, he couldn't taste, he had a fever, he was super tired. He was really sick for about 10 days. And then he started coming out of it, he started feeling better. But it was scary because it was taking so many people out, you just didn't know, it was going to take him out. He was pretty healthy, but still, it was the unknown. It was the unknown factor of so many things that you just really didn't know.
I had a colleague the first one that died that I knew, a colleague that died. Then I had an uncle that went for hip replacement, I think, to the hospital and got COVID and died.
I did know somebody through some, friend of a friend of a friend, and he was older, he was health challenged, and he did die from it.
Nobody in my family got, until ironically this year, at the beginning of the year when my family got COVID, but they didn't get that sick. And I think by then COVID maybe mutated down a bit, but I did know some people who lost people, and that's really sad. It was sad.
We know that people got it, but they didn't pass away from it, which is good. We heard of people who had passed away, but they were not acquaintances or friends or anything like that. These are just, why were you out that night? Why did you go to that party? Why did you do that? There were a lot of people that got it. Some of my family got it, but everybody was fine. Since we lived together, the same thing's true for her. Some of her family got it, but everybody was fine. Everybody got over it. It was weird. And we were very careful about who we had around us, making sure that they were not people that were going out a lot.
So one after the other got sick in the lab. The good thing was it was spaced out. So luckily only 1 or 2 people were out, not the whole lab at one time. In spite of masking, in spite of everything, everybody got sick. The good thing was we got sick in the beginning, and we had mainly young people. And I myself, I'm not young, I'm really at the risk of dying from this. So I masked up and did everything I could, and knock on wood, I didn't get it. So we got through that by just one after the other getting sick and then getting back into the lab again, and we tried to rotate around and we did whatever we could.
We were very fortunate. I can't think of anybody that got COVID that year that I knew. I knew of plenty that some had died. The mayor, he was not mayor any longer. He was a councilman or something else. He'd just been elected to. He went to an election party where he had been elected for this position after he'd been mayor of Key West for many years. And he and his wife contracted COVID, and the wife died. He survived. Their daughter got it and survived for about 6 or 8 months and then died of all the complications and stuff. And of course, that was huge around here. That was huge news, and everybody in town was terrified.
I remember getting my hair done, and the hairdresser was talking about how her father-in-law had just recently died. And everyone thought he was healthy before that. And he was only in his 50s, like early 50s. And I kind of remember thinking like, oh, it got me thinking about, well, maybe I should consider getting vaccinated. Because I didn't know. It was just really weird hearing somebody talk about that right next to me, like in person, where I was reading about it everywhere online. And there was no denying that it was happening. But it hits different when it's in your own community. Yeah.
Our tax man died of it. I was actually a part of a support group at the time that COVID started, and one of our members died of it. Like, this was early on. None of my immediate family, thankfully.
A friend's son, he passed away from COVID. And I have another friend in Selma, Alabama. She came down with it and she left too.
And it felt like, will this end? How will this end? And I did lose a few people that I knew to COVID. So that was just an extremely, it was devastating, but we made it through. We made it through.
We lost one person to death. My brother is married to a woman from Italy. And very early in the pandemic, her sister died of COVID at the very beginning. Italy was almost ground zero. It was really bad. So her sister, young woman in her mid to late 40s, healthy, no other problems, got up one morning with kind of a sniffle, and she called her doctor. I have a bit of a cough and a runny nose. He said, I want you to come in right away. She never left the hospital. She died that day. COVID.
I had friends around the country that suddenly I was hearing from that they were getting it. There was a coworker I had when I lived in Arizona. I talked to her one week online and she was fine. Everything was cool. And about a week and a half, 2 weeks went by, and I got an email from another coworker from Phoenix who said, I don't know if you've heard, but so-and-so has died. And I'm like, what? I just talked to her last week. I said, yeah, she got COVID and went that fast. And so it was a shock because she was perfectly healthy, perfectly fine a week and a half before, to being dead a week and a half later. And so that shook me up.
I had one very good friend, someone that I read for on an annual basis on her birthday, that was hospitalized in intensive care on a ventilator, and we did not think she was going to make it. Thin, fit, never been ill a day in her life.
What was quite upsetting, of course, is I was talking to clients who were dealing with family members who had it or who were absolutely terrified because they were in some kind of compromised position. When you're doing a lot of work on Zoom, the people that you're speaking to very much become your world. I don't have conversations face to face anymore. All my friends are on Zoom. So all of these clients, it was really just quite heartbreaking to listen to the difficult situations that they're in.
I received a message that my sister, who lives in Missouri, died of complications of COVID.
My best friend and next door neighbor died of COVID. Strangely enough, I was to go out with her to get our nails done that Monday, and she got the COVID variant on Saturday. So she called me Sunday night and said, I can't go. I've got COVID. And I said, oh. And I wasn't that worried at first.
No one was allowed visitor, of course, except family. I tried to just send my love and light to her. And she was such a good person. No question she's in heaven. Yeah, she was just marvelous. Just a sweetheart. Just one of the nicest women I've ever known.
My dad was about 93 and he did get it, and he ended up in a respite care situation. He hadn't had any company, as you can imagine. It was COVID. So at one point, I called my siblings and I said, let's head over there and I'll meet outside of his window. And so we bought tiny flashlights, and I'm from a large family. And so we all showed up. There's 8 children and some of the sibs and some of the kids. Some couldn't make it, but there was probably 15 of us. And it was really sweet. We just went up to his window and he hadn't seen anybody. So, when he looked out the window, he just looked like he couldn't believe it. And he started to cry. It was sweet.
Several people in my community who had passed, and we almost lost one that he's still on a ventilator. My neighbor across the street, to be an example, she was a daycare worker. She was still taking care of kids. One of the daycare worker parents brought COVID to her. She was in the hospital for over 6 weeks. And we didn't know she was going to live or die. Literally, the moment she finally tested negative, I went to go get her, because she's my neighbor, from the hospital. And the nurse came out in tears. And she goes, one went to the morgue and the other one gets to go home. She goes, I have no understanding of this. And she was telling her of her day. I have a lot of friends who are in the medical facilities and the medical profession. Devastated. These people are like shell-shocked. They're still walking through their trauma of what happened during COVID, not only trying to fix people, trying to keep safe, trying to not get their own family members sick, and literally watching the patients that they're taking care of, not knowing which one was going to go home and which one was going to the morgue that day. I mean, that's horrible. But yeah, I knew a lot of them.
Initially, when the news reports started to come out about a virus, and I hear like a little this or a little that. And I just knew it was much, much bigger.
My husband and I didn't know what to do. We were hearing all these things all over the planet, didn't know what to do.
I think the biggest thing that struck me was just in the beginning, just how scary it all was. Suddenly people were dying left and right. You're seeing all this stuff on the news, and hospitals are like, we're out of PPE. They got dead bodies stacking up in Central Park. And it's like, oh my God, it's like we're in the middle of the dark ages or something.
So many people were dying. Every time you turn the TV on, thousands of people, family members, neighbors, so many people were dying. And I have a daycare, and I'm scared because one of the children bring it here. Were the families careful enough not to bring it here, because we had to be open so that the nurses and the doctors, they could be open. So they wanted us to be open. And just so happens that I had a lot of parents that were healthcare providers. So I felt kind of comfortable with my group that they wouldn't bring the disease to me or my husband or my family or my grandchildren. But it was a scary time because it felt like nobody was in charge. Nobody was taking responsibility. Every time I saw the president, he was making up another story and another story. And I had no confidence in his ability to take care of the problem that we were all having.
That's one reason why I started to retire, because COVID was going through the institutions. And it was just when they were starting to talk about airborne. And our facility is old. It was mandated to wear a mask when we had to get checked before we went to work, as far as temperature. But then they started mandating we also wear a mask inside our office. So we're like going, why would we have to wear it inside? Then we put two together is because of the air conditioning, but they didn't want to say that. They didn't want us to know because they didn't want us to get afraid. And at that point, maybe they weren't sure that it was airborne.
I did lose some business. There were a couple of times where I had to quarantine. I didn't know because back then, it's like if you were just near somebody or whatever, you couldn't come to work. So I did lose probably, I don't know, 3 weeks probably worth of business.
I want to say this COVID pandemic transformed the whole environment, the work environment, I should say. Obviously, the messaging from the government at that time was so confusing and contradicting that as a nurse and people in the healthcare industry, doctors, whoever, respiratory therapists, you name it, personal care aides, we've been around communicable diseases before, contagious diseases. We've worked in the hospital settings. We kind of knew what precautions needed to be taken. But seeing the population that didn't believe in this pandemic or the existence of COVID made it very challenging. And not only on the patient side, because they didn't care whether they masked or whatever, but also staff and friends or people that we knew that didn't think that COVID was a thing. It was like they didn't understand the impact on society by them not taking precautions.
We're used to seeing tragedy, if you can get used to that. But for people to say it didn't exist was insulting, to say the least. And we didn't have time to argue with them. Nobody had time to argue with anybody. You just went home and went to bed and got back up and did it again.
People in my group, they were the believers, the non-believers. We had every single kind of color and aspect. And unfortunately, we lost a few workers to COVID and we had a few deaths. And that was very sad to see that people could really be so myopic, that they weren't willing to tolerate another truth or even give it some, perhaps, a little bit of space. And that was kind of sad.
I'm in the South, and some people don't want anybody telling them what to do. They didn't want to put a mask on, which I insisted. Because at that point, I just turned 80 the last day of the year. So I was a senior citizen anyway, and I sure didn't want to catch COVID.
One lady worked in a place where nobody would wear masks. So she would be there at this grocery store, nobody's wearing masks. And she had a daughter that was very immunocompromised who couldn't take the meds. Every day she had to go to work to feed her child. And every day she was absolutely terrified that she was going to bring it home and kill her. I felt so bad for this poor woman and for so many people who lost family members. There were some really heartbreaking stories out there. And I will really never forgive the politicians who were in power at that time, because 99% of that suffering just didn't need to happen. It was just carelessness.
I lost a ex-brother-in-law and his wife. They died within 3 days of each other. And they were, how can I say this? They were not very aware human beings.
One of my cousins and her husband, who are both in their 50s, they both got it bad. And they tried to deal with it at home for like a week before they had to go to the hospital. And they couldn't deal with it anymore. And they were able to give her antibiotics and medication, and she was able to go back home because their son was like 8 or 9, I think. But her husband got it really bad. I mean, like put in ICU bad. And for a while, we didn't know if he was going to make it or not. It was really scary. And unfortunately, they were on the extreme right belief that it was all a hoax. It was all fake. They're making this up, and then they got it and had to grapple with the fact that it's not a hoax and it is real. And then they wanted to fight the doctors with every treatment that they were trying to give them to make them better. But they almost intubated them. It was close. And at that stage of the illness, most people that were intubated didn't live. They just didn't survive it. We were lucky there, but he has long-term COVID now. I mean, it's been 3 years, and he still has to carry oxygen with him everywhere he goes with the little nose clamps in his nose. He can't work anymore. He can't do any of the things he used to do before because his lungs are like, the way the doctors put it, like fragile glass, like blown glass, how fragile that is. That's what his lungs are like now.
One of the things that stands out most in my mind is that I had an appointment with my doctor in July of 2020. He always came out to get his own patients because he didn't have a nurse that was employed under him. When he came out to get me, I was horrified. He was of Italian descent with an olive complexion. When he came out to get me for my appointment, he was as white as a ghost, and he was not wearing a mask. Of course, I was wearing a mask, and we had our appointment, but I can just remember thinking to myself, how many people has he infected? Because there was no doubt in my mind that he had COVID. A month later, he died of COVID. He was someone who was a real Trump fan, and I guess believed the story about it being a Democratic conspiracy or whatever people were thinking at the time. Fortunately, I didn't get sick, but I just remember feeling really bad about the people that were his patients that probably did get sick, and maybe some even died. So I just found that very sad. I found it sad that he died. I found it sad that he probably infected other people. So I think that's one of the things that really affected me the most, is just that whole thing about people not believing that it was real or that it was going to go away quickly or not kill people or whatever. And this was a medical professional. This is somebody that should have known better, probably should have done his own research or whatever. So it was just very sad to me that that happened.
I had actually, I think, gotten an early version of, or a terrible flu similar to COVID in 2019. So I'd been sick for about a month. Not terrible the whole time, but terrible some parts of it. And then I got well.
I had just actually, interestingly enough, I'd gone to the health food store to get some lunch or something for my journey to eat on the way. And I picked up this very strong, with lots of essential oils, like a spray for your throat, thank God. So I started on my journey and I developed this very intense, really bad sore throat. I mean, the worst sore throat thing I've ever had, and I've had plenty of them in my life. And it just got worse and worse. And thank God I had this spray, which kind of kept it kind of under control until I got home. And I got pretty sick. In retrospect, that could have been COVID. It was so bizarre. The sore throat was so incredibly bad. And then I thought I was okay. I went and got maybe some chicken or something and made myself some chicken soup. On Christmas Day, I was really sick and I was down for the count for several days. So that could have been COVID.
My partner thinks that we had COVID. He thinks it just didn't show up in the test. He thinks that it must have happened because close people were in a room with, they got COVID. But if I got it, it was long, but not severe. And happily, no one within my friend or family circle got it in a way that was severe.
I did get COVID before it was officially announced. When it first started, I just thought it was the flu. However, at one point, two really important things. At one point, I sat up out of bed and I couldn't move my legs. I was like paralyzed. My sacrum was frozen. And I used my cell phone to call. I have 3 daughters, one of my daughters, and I said, you know that I'm sick, but I can't move. And she's just kind of talked me through it. I don't know how long this piece was, 15, 20 minutes. Eventually I got up and was starting to move, and she said, Mom, just go get some Advil. That gives you some space and you'll just feel better. So I had taken some Advil and I went back to bed. And I was so sick that this was even before quarantine was even a word, right? I was sick before it was known. And I called my children at one point and I said, I don't know what this thing is that I have. I'm quarantining myself. Do not come over. If you want to bring me soup or anything, leave it at the front door.
So there were so many of us slingers. There are a lot of nurses out there that had COVID during that. And have lingering problems, muscle problems. I have people that are wearing braces from the damage it did. I did have COVID, but I was very lucky in my physical responses to it. I did not have any respiratory problems. I had lots of other problems, but not respiratory. And I was very, very sick for about 10 days at home. That's the only time I stayed home throughout the whole thing.
The big thing is it's very easy to view things in terms of before COVID and after COVID. And it's like everything seems to fall into that category. It's like one of those major moments in your life before the birth of my child, after that kind of thing. Both my son and I were very impacted by COVID right at the very beginning. That both of us had gone for our flu shots. And then within a few days, we started to feel sick. So we thought, yeah, you had the flu shot, right? What do you expect? But it wasn't getting any better. And so luckily where I lived, they had a bunch of drive-in places where you could go and they would do the test as you were driving through. So one night we decided that, yeah, maybe just to be on the safe side, we better go. So we went through the drive-through, took our COVID test, and the day after, both of us received text messages saying, you tested positive. You're now in quarantine. And this was because it was in the beginning, it was like 5 weeks quarantine. You kind of look around and you go, okay, I didn't prepare for that. Like, what are we going to do about groceries? Like, what happens now? Like, we can't leave the house. I mean, we shouldn't leave the house. You don't know what the impact is going to be. There was a lot of practical things to consider. And yeah, once we had those down, then it was okay, well, what do we do now? What do we do now? We had a few days that both of us were laying in bed and honestly, yeah, thinking I need to get up to go to the bathroom. But really, how bad would it be if I just peed in the bed? I mean, it sounds disgusting, but it took energy to think. It took energy to do anything and everything.
In March, I got COVID before the vaccine. I had to be taken to the emergency room via ambulance from my work. So that happened. I was able to go through it, but I still have problems. I used to be able to get on my elliptical for quite some time. Now I can't. Walking, it seems to be strenuous. I still have the kind of problems, even though it didn't go into my lungs like everybody else's, because for some reason, some told me to sit up the whole time, and I never, ever laid down. I have no idea if that's really what worked, but I do know that they took x-rays and it never did get into my lungs, and I had a mild case of it. So I had that going that restricted me. I lost numbness in my fingers. Taste is still, I used to love Butterfingers. Now they just taste like chemicals. So it's weird. Those things are weird.
I went into a clinical trial afterwards for COVID related after problems. I still have problems with my taste and smell. It's never going to be normal, but I was so very, very lucky that I didn't have the respiratory problems.
I know a friend who went to India, father, she didn't even get to see the body. They took his cell phone away and she lost all the, I mean, it was like horrendous stuff you were listening to. And stuff that was happening over here. It was hard to watch. It's really, really hard to watch. And then the after effects of this disease, we will never know. People are still suffering and there's no respite from any of this stuff.
I personally was not fearful. I don't know why, but I just didn't, I don't know. You know how you just know that you're going to make it out? You just kind of knew. But my family members really tanked. My brother, he goes, this is not funny anymore because he's a Trumper. And then his sister got it. And then he's just like, stop. And goes, this is not funny anymore. I can't lose you. I had friends that were checking on me. I literally have friends in town that were dropping off herbal remedies, soup. I mean, I had an entourage of friends and stuff like that that were incredibly worried, and they were dropping off things at my front door.
There was no test at that time either. No, and this was like he got sick like I want to say when did everything shut down in March, and I think he got sick in February. So when he got sick, there was no test. Maybe the doctors and nurses had tests, but the general public, there was no test. There was no test at the clinics. There was no test.
We didn't test for it either because at that time, I had to go somewhere else to get tested, like on Fort Carson, because unless you were bad enough to stay in the hospital, they were not testing you. They weren't wasting their tests on you. What they would put on the thing was possible COVID, or the symptoms are COVID related or something along that lines, but they would not give you a test. I had to go somewhere else for a test. So the tests weren't available like they were like months later and stuff like that, but nobody else got sick.
Interestingly, the hospital then called again and said, "We need to test for COVID." I said, "Yeah, I know that, but we have no testing reagents." I said, "Okay, I know what you want. You want me to manufacture the testing reagents." So I said, "I will come up with transport buffer and everything. When you take the samples from people, you have to put them into something, into tubes." They had absolutely nothing. And so I made up on the fly a protocol how we can actually make the transport buffer and all of these things necessary to transport the samples in and keep them viable and getting them to the testing lab. It was very new at that time, but we had it. But we had no way to transport the samples in whatever containers and media to the lab. And so I said, okay, I'm going to call the FDA. I'm going to propose a method to the FDA, how to make that and be approved. So called the FDA with my proposed method, and I was approved within 24 hours. They had a hotline at that time. So I got the approval to manufacture that for regular clinical use, which is very difficult. Only pharmaceutical companies usually get that. I got it in 24 hours, the approval. So we started to manufacture the testing reagents for COVID. So all of our lab members were in. We tried to get the reagents in. We couldn't get them in because FedEx wasn't working. So I ordered it from anyone, everywhere, with the little amount of transportation that was available at that time. They broke 2 of these big glass bottles, whatever, because they hired some unskilled help. But we got it in, and we started manufacturing these, and we still continue to make the life-saving products for the patients.
We have procedures in place to deal with contagious disease, but we didn't have the supplies. We didn't have those things to help us to do the job that we know how to. So we had to be creative. And a lot of times, I'll be honest, I used the same equipment day after day because I didn't have anything else. And then maybe we would use some other items that we normally wouldn't use to protect ourselves. When you're a healthcare professional, you kind of get into this complacency. Like you go about your business day to day. It's the same thing you do every day, right? Like, it's like, oh, I got this. I'm not even thinking twice about it. But during the COVID pandemic, it was like, holy cow. We always had critical thinking skills, but now it was like every day, every minute of the day, it's always what I shouldn't do to get anybody else sick or myself sick. And so the pressures, the work environment in that sense was different.
Our docs and our nurses went around with blisters on their face from their N95 masks that they wear 12 hours at a day at a time. The masks were harmful to our faces, and we didn't dare take them off.
I'm very grateful for the vaccines. It was weird to go get them, and everybody was rushing to go get them. That was one other really bizarro thing, is even though I'm a blue dot in a red sea here in Florida, I had to drive to this, man, I can't even remember the name of the town. It's out in BFE, little country town, thank goodness. And they set up this immunization place, and it was a scary drive. It was way out in the middle of nowhere. Two lane roads, semi trucks, grain trucks, just everything was crazy. And that's where I got my first 2 shots. Yeah, so it was a little crazy. Otherwise, you had to wait a long time because a lot of Republican older people went and got vaccinated.
We went to the ballpark, LA Dodgers Park to get our vaccines, and it was crazy because I mean it was like snaking in and out of this huge parking lot thing, and there was all these stations set up to give you your shot. It felt like we were all in it together, but because there was so much political turmoil going on at the same time, it felt like we were pulling apart. So if you can imagine feeling like everybody was on the same page, but not.
I'm a registered nurse, so I worked in the Bureau of Prisons, and we had like 2,000 inmates that I took care of. And this was during the time of the pandemic. I think around March or so, the COVID cases started rising. So a lot of my memory in 2020 is a result of the exposure to COVID that I had, and also caring for the inmates and also patients, because I also had a second job.
I am an RN. I retired 3 years ago, but in 2020 and 2021, I worked in the emergency room of a very, very busy hospital where we have over 200 bed ER that I worked in. The restrictions at home was nothing because I went to work every day the way I had to. And I was one of the people that there was no staying at home available. My husband, however, being elderly, decided to live in the basement since I came and went from the emergency room all the time filled with COVID. He went down and lived in the basement. So I had very little contact with him for that year and a half, actually. I was in the ER and we saw much tragedy there. Our ER was a hot spot for about 6 to 7 months. Almost everyone in the hospital was COVID.
My son got sick. He has an entirely different story. His in-laws lived right next to them. So it's like the 2 houses just go back and forth and back and forth. And his wife is a physician's assistant. So what they did was everybody moved over to the kid's house and Amy stayed by herself over at the one house. I think it was tough on her. I'm glad that Ivan was right next door because she might not have been able to get in touch with him, but he could see her from the other side of the door. They could see each other and talk to each other. So that helped.
Every day was a new challenge. We were faced with a high volume of COVID patients, inmates, and also staff. So there was that other side too. So not only did we deal with a lot of the COVID patients, but also the staff who were getting sick. It was emotionally draining to witness the impact of this virus on the people that we cared for, and also our colleagues and friends.
Many people in the ER had it and had friends and family members die of COVID. This was during the first episode. There was nothing that they could do because they didn't know what to do with it. Nothing they did made any difference to the people. The treatment was very lack. They just could not figure out how to treat the people with it. And so many people died. It was heartbreaking where I was, but at the same time, my life virtually did not change. I went to work and came home every day and did the same thing I always did every day. We just buckled up and did it. There was not time for news flashes and sadness. At one point, we did have the military helping us out in the emergency room, but that was kind of like after the main part was all over. We got help after it was over. It was very sad.
I just felt for the frontline workers. My heart just went out to everybody. And I know what it's like to work in that community. And you're just so taken, you just have to do the work. You know what I mean? And they don't care. They'll work at 15 hours or whatever, just do it. Just do it. They don't think of you. And I'm sure so many of them are still suffering from PTSD and everything. And so many people have left.
I think what helped me was my ability to connect with the patients. and colleagues and families of these individuals that were getting sick. And so that helped us navigate those challenges a little better. So that was one thing that kept us going, and just dealing with all these new challenges. And we're talking about 400, 500 inmates with COVID at one time. And so, specifically speaking, in my prison, I was the only nurse that worked in that prison. And so I was obviously relegated to the COVID unit because, from my background, the warden felt, hey, the nurse should be taking care of these patients, or inmates rather. So I would walk into a huge area with 100 COVID inmates, COVID positive inmates, and treated them on a daily basis, sometimes 7 days a week, because there was nobody else that they allowed from the other camps to come to the COVID area. So it was just myself and another nurse practitioner that the warden was like, you have to work in this prison, taking care of the COVID patients. So we did that for, I don't know, months on end, for 3-4 months, nonstop, working 7 days a week, taking care of these COVID inmates. Granted, they were inmates, but they were human beings.
One of the most poignant moments in my ER was in my little area. We had the environmental, the housekeepers come in and clean beds for us and everything. And I hadn't seen my housekeeper the entire night because I worked 7P to 7A nights. And so when she came in about 6:30 in the morning, I said, where have you been all day? I haven't seen you. I mean, I was cleaning my own beds. That was no problem. I knew she was busy. And she said, I've been up in ICU. They're dying so fast up there, I can't clean the beds fast enough. That to me was heartbreaking. It was until you're in the middle of this, people saying things like it's a farce and it doesn't really happen. That is absolutely heartbreaking to me.
One of my parents, she worked at a nursing home, and just so many people were just dying. And then my daughter-in-law, she was a nurse. Well, she still is a nurse. And she was just telling me it's so depressing to go to work every day, and people are just dying. It's like there's nothing we can do for them. And by the time they get to the hospital, it's too late. It's too late for them. And she said, every day it's just more and more death. And she was like, wow. Even today, she said, all of that we went through and being nurses and doctors, we really were never compensated for that. Really, to me, they were heroes to even go to work every day and not know if you're going to bring it home to your kids or if you're going to get it and die. But they had to face that challenge every single day. Every single day. That's got to be hard. I don't know how you ever get over that, really. Just as a healthcare provider who's supposed to save, and then you just have to watch people die. It's terrible.
One of our emergency room doctors had been in Doctors Without Borders in Africa for Ebola a long time ago. And so he went to New York during the time when New York was really, really bad. And when he came home, there was no talking about it. These are things you just don't talk about.
So when you talk about COVID and having to do this or the restrictions or masking or anything like that, it's just like, well, it's just something you got to do. And that's kind of my approach to life. When negative things might happen, if you have differences, where I come from is always, well, okay, but what do we do from here? I can't say everything is fixable, but certainly everything can be gotten through. You can get through. So that's just kind of the approach I take to life. And I guess that is because I do have a spiritual foundation, even though maybe the words used are different. The reference to God is more like the reference to the source energy, but still it's the same foundation of belief and having faith that everything is going to work out in one way or another, and we can get through this. We struggle with it and make it a difficulty. The more we do that, the more we struggle.
To me, what was worse than COVID itself were
the politicians and how they were using it to manipulate people. They were using it to project fear. They were using it for fear mongering. And one of the things I used to tell my clients, and I still do, that number one, you have to go with what you feel is right for you. It's important to be aware of what you're doing or aware of what's going on, but don't let fear rule you or your life, because you do, you're done, you're lost.
I dropped off. We were very social people, parties and travel, like everybody else in the world was normal stuff going on. And then COVID happened, and I'm like, okay, groceries are going to come in my garage. I put a big party table. I put a laundry basket. We put our clothes there. I wouldn't let us bring our clothes inside. We'd run inside to the bathroom, have a bath, and I mean head to toe bath. There was like a prep table outside. People still laugh at me, but neither of us got COVID. And everybody could work from home and stuff. So I was very, very regular and even now when I go out to get a hair done or go in a group, I come back and the clothes get shed in the laundry room. I'll run to the bathroom and I'll wash up and change. I mean, it's become like second nature to me. And which is a good thing. Why bring all the stuff from outside inside in any case? And we have outside shoes and inside shoes in any case. So that's a good thing.
Other people's outside of my household, members of my family did, which, like really curtailed Christmas gatherings and those kinds of things. When I retired, it was really surreal because usually there's a retirement dinner or something that people plan off hours, and there was no like hoopla or congratulations because everybody was in their offices. I mean, you didn't even get the like, what's happening? Oh, I'm gonna retire. Oh, congratulations! All that kind of stuff. All that interaction was just void, missing.
It felt very heavy and dark, and also very sad that so many people were getting sick and dying. And that was a really hard thing to witness, people suffering. I felt like it was very hard in that way.
One of the things that I regretted the most is that my father died and I was not able to go to Puerto Rico. See, I have 4 comorbidities, including leukemia. So the doctor told me, because we don't even have the vaccine yet. So I had to see the burial of my father through WhatsApp. And there were like my sisters, my brother, and his then girlfriend. Those were the ones, and the burial people. He was cremated though, and it was easier.
The other thing I noticed was we were losing a lot of seniors all over the planet. Personally, knockwood, I didn't lose anybody close to me, but I had friends that lost. And at that point, I wrote another treatment called Wisdom Series, where the concept was to interview seniors in a 10-question format only. And from those 10 questions, get the wisdom from them, which we are losing because they are passing on. The younger kids have no clue. It's this that they're relying on information, not life experiences. And now we've lost a whole section of the community, just like this. And with them, we've lost so much of the wisdom on this planet that breaks my heart to think about it.
We got to see a lot of deaths as a result. That was really the hard part. Not only that they were inmates and they're treated a different way just because they're inmates, but also just they're human beings and they have families out there and they were just dying left and right. And so from the political perspective, the messaging wasn't there. They were minimizing the actual, the pandemic, like the nature of it, right? And so just seeing that, and I guess the president we had at that time didn't help. He was peddling all kinds of different narratives and untruths. I worked for the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Prisons, so he was basically our commander. He was like the big gun there. And seeing him do this to not only people, but just even the facilities, the federal facilities. Like, he wouldn't give us PPEs, personal protective equipment. It was a struggle to get that. And now we know it's deadly, this virus, but also just dealing with unsatisfactory environment in terms of being able to care for these, not only for ourselves and also these inmates and patients. So it was challenging. There was a lot of reflection, I should say.
There's a lot of people that transitioned during COVID that weren't just dying of COVID, partially because of the medical system being broken at the time. And just, who knows? It was almost like a portal opened up and it's like, okay, come on home. It seems like a lot of people died. It was really bizarre. It felt very weird in that way to me. So many people being sick and so many people dying through that period.
In our religion, we have this iron pot, iron stand in which we light a fire. It's like a bonfire type thing. So prayers. Basically, fire is one of the things to clear up the energy around you. So we did the whole thing with all the scriptures type stuff. And then for 4 months, I lit an oil lamp in my kitchen for guidance or light for the planet because didn't know what else to do. And then I realized after 4 months, there's too much oil being consumed because it was lit 24/7. I had to make sure, because if it died, then it would be a bad omen for me, kind of superstitious that way. So I kept it lit and making sure the oil was there. And I'm like, okay, this is a lot of oil being consumed. And then I stopped doing that. But that thing sat on my kitchen counter for 4 months.
One of my oddest experiences was going in and out of time. And at one point, I could see an Egyptian scroll unraveling from my abdomen, going off this way to the right. I could see the hieroglyphs, and I knew it was significant. It felt to me like a time capsule was unfolding. And I saw Nefertiti's outline, which is pretty significant. It's the Egyptian woman. I think she was a queen. We see it sometimes symbolically with the Egyptian hat. It's just symbolic when you see that, like, oh, that's the Queen of Egypt. Well, later, after COVID, the oddest thing was I didn't know that was Queen Nefertiti at the time. I just recognized the symbol. And I don't know, it was a couple weeks later, and I had gone to the ear doctor. And when the nurse walked in, she was complaining, like, I'm never in the sight and I don't know where anything is. And she's talking and talking, and she whips around and faces me, and she had a pendant on of Queen Nefertiti that was the exact symbol. So I knew Spirit was telling me something significant, but it certainly felt to me like something was unraveling. Yeah, there was an unraveling that happened with COVID. And I do believe that happened when part of my DNA and just parts of whatever history is in this body, part of it was unraveling, perhaps setting up a new beginning.
That event has changed us forever, but I feel it was something in our period of time that we needed to go through. From the spiritual realm, I've always heard everything is the way it's supposed to be. Even though it looks horrific and we don't understand it, there's a plan and there's a reason why it's happening. We could try to make sense of it and we can't. We just have to go with it and kind of rise above it and stay in a place of the highest you can stay. That's all I could say.
It felt like a lot of heaviness. And it also felt to me like a gateway that brought in this period of darkness that we're in. And it was like the first, well, it wasn't the first thing. Probably Trump winning the election was the first thing. And it was just sort of a deepening of that kind of dark energy. I felt like it was the universe giving us a chance to course correct and do the right thing and take care of each other and learn the value of life and do our internal spiritual work. And some people did that, and other people I felt like fought it like tooth and nail, you know, which is unfortunate, I think.
I lost quite a few colleagues to the COVID-19 virus. And this was kind of devastating because it was just that people were just dropping like flies. And it was just like, what is going on here? It kind of just reminded us how dangerous life can be. And if we don't take it seriously, we're putting everybody in jeopardy, even the people that are trying to do the right thing. But it also gave me a sense of strength, sense of belonging, because I was helping so many inmates, patients. But it gave me this, I don't know, this sense that there's a greater good despite everything. We can overcome challenges. So I'm grateful to have made a difference, but it was really hard.